Welcome to the South by East podcast, where we discuss culture, the scriptures, and everything in between and how they impact Southeast Topeka with your co-hosts, Jonathan Sublett and Braille Watson.
Man, welcome to the South by East podcast. We are back in the spot where we talk about the scriptures, the culture, everything in between. And in our last episode, we were talking about Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And so since we've already talked about being united in grief, we thought it would be great to talk about what grief is and how we process through grief. And so I have a special guest with us today who needs no brief introduction, and so I'm gonna give you a long one. Phelicia Glass. Phelicia Glass is a licensed specialist clinical social worker with a successful psychotherapy practice here in Topeka, Kansas. Phelicia is a graduate of Washburn University with a bachelor's in behavioral sciences and a graduate from Tulane University with a master's in clinical social work and certification of gerontology. Because of her love for people, she also holds a certification as a sex offender treatment provider and has special training in suicide bereavement. Now, her unique style of therapy is both effective and engaging, using cognitive, behavioral, solution-focused, theraplay, and parent-child interactive treatment methods. She believes in empowering the voice of her clients through motivation and advocacy. And Phelicia is also a member of the Zeta Phi Beta sorority.
Absolutely.
Inc. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Chi Delta Zeta chapter of Lawrence in Topeka, Kansas. And she currently holds the position of regional mental health coordinator. In other words, she knows a lot. So we about to learn a lot today. Would you guys please join us in welcoming to the South by East podcast, Miss Phelicia Glass.
Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Y'all making me feel like a superstar over here.
Man,
Stop
you came
it.
in
Stop
real.
it.
I got that bio and I was like, ooh, what country did she start? Like, she's getting it. She's getting it. Zamunda.
Y'all silly.
Man, and so like here on the podcast, we like to like humanize the people we get, because we get a lot of really cool people here.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of amazing people in our communities. And so we also like to make sure that people know that there are real people behind all of those big names and certifications. And so I had a few just personal questions for you. Is there a TV show right now that you are currently rocking with?
So listen, y'all might think I'm crazy.
Nah, bring it on.
But,
on.
here's the reality. My family is so jealous because I spend all my evening time with Steve Harvey.
Hey.
All my evening time with Steve Harvey.
My evening time.
I am a junkie for Steve Harvey. His judge show, his game show.
Yeah.
I get on Facebook and get to finding his motivational videos.
He directs Family Feud right
Family
now, right?
Feud is his show. He owns Family Feud.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yes, he owns Family Feud.
I forgot about that.
So, listen, I don't know what it is, but here's the reality.
Mustache, get it.
Steve speaks real to real people. So no matter what role he's in, Steve's got a word for the people. And if he was preaching in the pulpit, I'd probably be in the audience because Steve is my guy.
The Church of Harvey.
Listen, you don't know. I sent my family a post saying, hey, yo, look, I got top fan at Steve Harvey. They was like, get out of here. And I sent him the picture. Listen,
she said, I got top fan.
Top fan.
She in there.
I'm in there.
Hey, when I talk, Steve, listen.
Listen, I be like, Steve Harvey, that's my boy. Like, Uncle Steve is the truth.
It is. Uncle Steve. All right.
Uncle
I messed with some Steve Harvey. How'd you feel when he had the faux pas? It's a couple years ago. I know.
We ain't going there. You're not going to do my Uncle Steve.
To a real fan, I had to ask. You hit him with that Kanye. If you said you ain't did it, then you ain't did it. Uncle Steve ain't do it.
Here's my theory. Everybody's human.
All right. Okay. Wow.
I appreciate his humanity.
I think there's some reality to that theory. I can back
appreciate his humanity.
Okay. We love Southeast Topeka. We talk a lot about Southeast Topeka. What is your favorite spot for either entertainment or food in Southeast Topeka?
So I'm definitely not going to touch entertainment because, listen, we can find great talent everywhere. So wherever talent is in Topeka, I'm coming for it.
I'm not mad at that.
But listen, on Fridays, I have a date.
Okay.
And on Friday, I date myself. And just about every single Friday that I make it to the east side, probably about 3 times a month, I'm going to be in prize package. We're on first name basis.
That's what I'm talking about, baby.
Yeah, we're on first name basis. They be like, oh, what you need, Phelicia? My phone calls like clockwork at 2:45.
Yeah, man. I grew up off of 13th and Illinois. And so I could walk down a prize package in it'd take about 20 minutes on foot.
Oh, but you was going?
Oh, yeah,
I was going. There. Yeah.
I knew.
So prize package was on my route from Lafayette Elementary to the Boys and Girls Club, to the Girls Club at the time. Okay. So I had my very first fight in their parking lot.
Come on, at Harold's?
At Harold's prize package. In between the burgers and the tires. Let's get it. Let's go. Harold's holds a special place in my heart. I appreciate that it's family owned. And in spite of what it might be, it's where my heart lies. So I want my greasy double cheeseburger, ketchup only, and I need my cheese bites. Give me that.
When people ask, they're like, "So where is this place?" I'm like, "Listen, I'm gonna send you this picture, and it's gonna look like a prison for cheeseburgers, but they got the flavor on lock." So I'm telling you, just roll inside. They're like, "Oh, well, can we meet there?" I'm like, "Well, you can't eat inside. You got to roll inside and get your food and roll out."
Right.
That's how they do it. That's how they
take it to the park. Take it to the park.
Keep it fresh.
Yeah.
They're inspiring you to walk. We do it for diabetes. So what album is on your heart right now? We're also music lovers. I don't know if you noticed. I'm a secular recording artist. So I'm also a secular recording artist. And so I keep up with the music industry. John is also a big music lover. And so we like to ask people, like, what album is on their heart right now? What you bumping?
Okay. So listen, I am not as big of a music head as I used to be.
Okay.
But I have a sorority sister who dropped the album last month. And her name is Khadijah Dene.
Okay.
And she dropped a song called Morning Glory. And on this weekend, she's doing video shoot number 2 up at Langston.
Word.
And so I've been pushing her stuff because I love her song, Morning Glory. It's just the idea of recognizing that, God gifted us a new day that we didn't deserve and should not have expected.
Oh,
and so even this morning, as I was leaving the house, which I rarely leave the house early in the morning because I work from home now. But even this morning, I sent her a shot and was like, "Hey, yo, this song, I appreciate it." Like, just to give your own some love. Like, we can bump all these major artists, but when we get to pushing out our own and encouraging them, let's get it.
Man, I'm all about that. So Khadijah Dene.
Khadijah Dene.
Man, we gonna try and get that
Glory.
link. All right, Morning
It's playing
Glory.
on every streaming service you can find. It's out there.
We'll have that in the description so y'all can check that out as well.
Yeah.
Man, and speaking of artists, so I spent some time over in Spain, right? And I did this TEDx event, and afterwards I was talking to this guy who worked in Obama's cabinet. We're on this roof overlooking the city in Valencia, and we doing the thing. It was beautiful, right?
Oh my God.
I was like, man, we doing it. We made it. And he was like, so what you doing next? I was like, man, I'm excited. I'm going to head back to Topeka and help build up the community with all the things I learned and blah, blah. He's like, Topeka? What's that? Topeka, Kansas, man. It's right in the middle of the map. He's like, why would you go back to Topeka?
Come on, man.
And so I had to I was like, man, by this time I had my elevator pitch ready about Topeka and what it is and why I needed to be here, why I feel like God had called me here. But I get that question a lot, and people who are really talented often get that question because people say, man, if you are extremely talented or if you're someone who can move the needle, then you should be moving to a different place. And so I didn't even name half of your qualifications and certifications in that introduction. So clearly you are very educated, you are very accomplished. Why is it that you choose to, and it seems to sound like you're from Topeka, when you're talking about Lafayette and boys, why did you choose to use your gifts to serve the people here in Topeka?
Really, so I often tell people I'm not from Topeka. I'm not born and raised here, but I was raised here.
Okay.
So I moved to Topeka permanently when I was about 11. Before that, I kind of did a back and forth. Spent some school years here, some school years in Mississippi.
Okay.
But the reality is that I've been to other places. Going to school at Tulane was an amazing adventure for me, and I love the culture. I love the people. I truly believe that Topeka is where God has placed me. I lost my brother while I was in grad school, which speaks to my heart for the grieving.
Yeah.
But the reality is that Topeka has a lot to offer. And so I believe that wherever I am, my gift should be shared.
Yes.
There's this theory, once a long time ago, my pastor or then pastor preached a sermon around the gifts. And, the minister talked about how, imagine that someone gave you a gift box and it was wrapped in all the most beautiful paper with the prettiest bows. Are you going to take that gift and sit it on a shelf and just adore it every day? Or will the anxiousness and anxiety about what's in the box going to get you stirred up enough to unwrap the gift? And so it was in that sermon that I learned that whatever gifts lie within me needed to be unwrapped. And when you're unwrapping the gift, you have to give your gifts to other people. I don't want to be a person who goes to the grave with a heavy casket because I left all my gifts inside of me. I want to be a person who leaves this earth empty so that all my gifts are laid out. So if it's in Topeka that my gifts are laid out and people benefit, meaning they live better lives, they're encouraged to have better relationships, they're able to overcome whatever obstacles are laid out because they heard one thing that impacted their life that came out of these clay lips. I want to be the lips that are used.
And you never know where that gift is going to make the most impact.
So
the point of a gift is to give it. So you give it, man. That is beautiful, man. I really love you going there. And so you're a grief counselor, right?
I am.
Suicide, Bereavement, and Awareness, American Academy of Grief Fellow.
Yes.
And so I think you hit on this a little bit, and that's why I wanted to kind of jump into this. For those who aren't aware, what does that mean? Like, what does that title mean? And then, like, what is it exactly that you specialize in, or where your heart is drawn to? Because you spoke a little bit about that with your brother, and so if you can share something.
So, in going to school, you're exposed to like everything, right? And ideally, as a social worker, I am trained in general practice. And so I can treat just in general the things that people are dealing with in life. But for me, it was about finding that thing that made me get up every day. And I think that, people can go to jobs and they find they just do the do to be doing the do, right?
True.
But for me, it was about being able to get up every day with purpose and passion. And, the book, Purpose Driven Life, is the thing that pushes you towards that, right? It's like it will unveil some things about you. And so after reading that book, we did like a church, overall study of the book and really just learning about myself. I was, in my mid-20s. At 24, I lost my brother, which really uprooted my life. Right after that, literally 3 months later, my mom had a massive stroke. And then several days later, I found out I was pregnant with twins. Then 4 months later, I delivered those twins at 4 months early. I went through a lot of grief, and I think people just tell you, get over it. God's got it. You ain't praying enough. Let's, ain't no place in here for doubt. Use your faith. Where your faith at?
Ain't no place in here for doubt.
Listen.
We're going to have to touch on that.
Listen. The reality was that for me, it became about, I needed to know more about what I was experiencing because people around me wouldn't talk about it. Or people around me would feel uncomfortable talking to me or listening to me share about my brother. And at this point, my brother has been gone 21 years. This October, it'll be 21 years. And to me, there are days where it's like it's yesterday. There are days that I can wake up and I feel his presence. There are days that I still wake up. I'm fortunate where I still believe I hear my brother's true voice, not a voice I made up in my head of who he is. Or what he sounds like. So for me, studying grief was about helping people, giving people a safe space to talk about the thing that's uncomfortable with their everyday people. And so a lot of times I think that churches shut you out in that they feel you hear this constant message of, oh, pray about it, honey. Well, God wouldn't put any more on you than you can bear. But they're in no more pain now. And I know that people intend well with those statements, but when you are, in my recent situation, when you are putting to rest your 17-year-old grandson, and there's lots of questions around his death. Having someone say, well, you know, he's in a better place now. What the?
Like, that's not
what
what
you
that's not
mean?
what I need
Like, what
right
do
now.
you mean? Like, no, he's not. Like, he should be here
with me.
right?
He
Like,
should be with
he should
me.
be here with his mom. And you know, the reality is that we have to get to a place where we're able to have conversations with people about the most painful places in their life and the painful experiences that they're having. You know, losing your job isn't an easy thing to do. Losing your home isn't an easy thing to do.
Right.
And so when people are in places where they feel like they're having conversations with people about the things or situations in their life where they can be judged, where their pain isn't about their pain, it's about, but what could you have done different? Or, you know, there becomes this finger pointing. I wanted to have a place where people could go and not experience that. And in Topeka, I realized that in all of our therapy community, there wasn't very many places doing that other than at a hospice. And so while people
hospice.
Until you're at
the end of your life,
right?
Now let's process.
Ideally, that's what people think. People think we only go to hospice if we're at end of life. We are fortunate here in Topeka that Midland allows people to go to their services even if they haven't lost someone that they've cared for at
awesome.
Midland. So,
Wow,
but we're not aware of that often, right?
I know.
But for me, it was about, I'll just be honest. My personal goal is to be the first freestanding grief center in Kansas that's not attached to a hospice.
Okay.
There are two. There's one in Kansas City that's a freestanding grief center, but it's attached to a hospice and partners with a hospice. And Midland partners with, you know, Midland is a hospice center. Well, you know, at some points in life, you get drifted. Like, even though I may not have my own center and get grief dollars, or dollars because I'm not a 501c3, I still want to be the face that people know when they are dealing with grief issues, whether it's suicide, bereavement, whether it's loss of a family member, whether it's loss of a job, children moving out of their home and they're empty nesting. I want people to know that there is someone who is trained, who is understanding, who is knowledgeable. And for me, the trainings are about giving people the evidence that you know what you know, right? Like, because, you know, you can read all kinds of books, but it's different to read books with understanding and be certified. You know, you can go see anyone.
To be able to put that into practice.
Yeah, you can go see anyone for grief.
Right.
You can.
Yeah.
But are they trained to handle your grief?
Your grief.
Are they trained to support you? I want to be the person that people call when they are having a trouble with their 8-year-old who lost their brother or lost their mother, you know, when they don't know how to have the conversation, when they don't know who to have the conversation with, when they're tired of the looks and they don't want to put the burden on their family. I want to be the person that people say, hey, I can lean in on Phelicia.
And that's so important because, like, you need someone who's a flagship for this, because often people don't even understand that they're grieving, nor do they know how to grieve. I was talking to, there's this really good songwriting coach, and really good undersells her. She's like a world-renowned songwriting coach. Her name's Susan Koch. And she was giving like a symposium type thing to this group that I'm in. And as she was talking, someone asked, they're like, well, what about when you run into writer's block? And this is a thing for like artists who are trying to be in the industry or working within the industry. And she was like, no, you never actually have writer's block. You should write every day. And they're like, but there's some days where I just can't write. She's like, no, that's not true. She was like, that's not true. She was like, the reason that you can't write is because what your heart really wants to write about, you don't want to talk about. And so when you find yourself in writer's block, it's not that you're blocked from anything, it's that you're on a different channel. It's the water is going somewhere else, and you don't want to go to that place. And so it's like, well, I'd rather talk about my girlfriend. I'd rather talk about love. I'd rather talk about something that would make me money. I don't want to deal with this other issue. And because of that, and because that's where my mind actually is, I can't actually tap into what's here because I'm blocked by this other thing that I really won't deal with. And it's like, I actually wrote a song. I'm gonna try and get you on. I'm about to hustle you in. I wrote this song, and it's like the first lines of it are, some days I don't write because what I write, I rehearse. I want light, but spit life that make me liable to curse. And it's like, I wrote it because I was trying to practice what she said, because I was like, man, I just ain't got no bars today. I ain't got nothing today. And it was like, yeah, I do. What don't I want to deal with? Let me just start writing. And as I started writing, I wrote this song. It really was about grief. It was just me grieving. And after I got done, I was like, I didn't want to write this. I don't want to read this back. I don't want to deal with this. But after I was done, writer's block was gone. Yeah. And so often we find ourselves not dealing with grief and we don't realize that it's actually blocking us up. It's so many different areas, like we can't connect with our loved ones because we haven't dealt with our grief. We can't connect with our friends because we haven't dealt with our grief. We can't connect with our own emotions because we haven't dealt with our grief. And so we keep throwing all of these like funisms on top of it. Like, well, you just need to pray more, baby, and God won't put more on you than you can bear. Like we be using scripture so out of context. To just be unhealthy.
Out of context.
To just be unhealthy.
Well, that and it's toxic. It's toxic, right? It's toxic. The reality is that people feel what they feel.
Yeah.
Right? So there's not a magic prayer that changes how you're feeling, but there's a prayer that gets you through until you don't feel it anymore.
Until you don't feel it anymore.
Right? So, perfect example.
Man, I'm going to stop you real quick before you hit there because we are going to take a brief break. But I want us to definitely have some time to jump into that. So hold on to that thought. Y'all hold on to those seats and we'll be right back with South by East.
Are you interested in podcasting, audio, or visual media, and just don't know how to get started or take your content to the next level? Then Studio 104 was built just for you. A fully functioning audio-visual podcast studio, industry-level equipment at an affordable price to help you make that album you always wanted, start that podcast, or even share the story of how your business is impacting the community. Book your session along with a free consultation today at www.fellowshiphighcrest.com/studio104.
All right, man. Welcome back to the South by East podcast. We are here with the illustrious Miss Phelicia Glass, and you were just about to get into an example of talking through. We were talking about how grief blocks you up and holds you up, and you had something that seemed like a gem to share. So I wanted to make sure we got to fully appreciate the diamond coming out.
So what I was going to share, Braille, is that just the other day, I was really struggling. People always look at your life and they're like, oh, I'm sure they don't struggle. Things are good with them, But we're in this place where the economy is having its impact on us financially as well.
Yes.
And so I was like just kind of heavy. And I've been in this place for the last week where I feel more empathic in that I can be in a room with someone and I feel like I'm carrying or I sense the heaviness of their emotions. And so I was, going through the day and I was just not feeling right and like, and I pray, and I'm someone who I have a ritual of I get up in the morning, I say my prayer, I will anoint myself because I hear things that I don't want to disturb me and I want to be able to give what God has for me to give someone else on the other end of what I'm sharing. And so I will sometimes just sit to write because I feel like I can't get out whatever the emotion is or the feeling is, right?
Same type of thing.
And so I just sat last night, I just kind of got into bed and I was like, hey God, listen, I'm feeling heavy today. I don't appreciate God, this is what I need from you. Like, I need you to show up. And, as I was writing, and this is crazy, but I wrote this very thing. And what I wrote was that I am a debt-free multi-millionaire is what I wrote. And just writing it, I put that phrase. And then I sent it to someone. I was having a conversation with one of my friends and she was like, well, I'm praying for you. And I was like, pray and stand in agreement that I am a debt-free multimillionaire. And it just came out of nowhere, right? Well, I think oftentimes when we're stuck, I was stuck, right? Yeah. And so I wasn't grieving money or financial situations. I was stuck in that I couldn't unleash whatever this emotion or feeling was that I was having.
Right.
And it could be all kinds of things. It could be sadness that pops up from losing my grandson. It could be sadness in that I feel like I can't put my arms around my daughter tight enough to release the pain that she's experiencing. I can't bring my granddaughter close enough because she's struggling with the loss of her brother. It could be 50 million things. My son is trying to go to college. My daughter's graduating cosmetology and finishing up and getting ready to transition to adulthood.
Right.
And so I say all of that to say we have lots of things that we are experiencing in this world at one time that we're holding, we're carrying. All of it brings such emotion and such heaviness. We have to remember that, okay, I'm feeling this, but it's okay to pause and do a dump. Right? Just do a dump. Let it all out on a piece of paper. You ain't got to have nobody in the room. You ain't got to share it with somebody special.
Yeah.
Just take a piece of paper and dump it. And for me, it worked in dumping it in that I wrote something that was profound that impacted me, right? It wasn't that I was thinking it. It was just like as I was writing, this phrase came out, right?
Yep.
And there's power behind the manifestation of our words. I know that, you know that. That's how we operate in this thing. But for me, it was about, but when I wrote it, I literally fell asleep. I wrote it. It was like, that's out.
It was the release.
It's out, right?
It's funny. I call it being emotionally constipated. Like,
No.
I'm like, I'm held up and there's something in my body and it's like whatever I've ingested, it may have been good for me at the time.
But it doesn't
right
fit
now,
now.
it doesn't fit now and it's got to get out. And until it does, like, I'm just cranky. Like my baby girl,
Yeah.
she really struggles with passing her bowels. And so she will go almost a week without unless we do something else, unless we intervene. And everything in her life just becomes like, I mean, she's about to be 3 in August, and everything in her life is just, or September, sorry. Everything in her life is just bad. Just no, and she's upset, and she's just cranky, and everything
She needs
takes
it out.
in, she needs it out, and she usually can't tell you that. In fact, she doesn't want to deal with the pain of passing it.
Right.
But she needs it out. And we all know, like, man, when you get that out, you're going to be a whole different person. And that's like that experience of like, man, once I have dumped, I get this out. And so here's something that I would like to hear what you think. That you said something in there earlier that really triggered me. You said, I've been dealing with, like, I've been becoming a more empathic person, like a more empathetic person. And it's like, for many of us, that is a gift, to be able to feel what other people feel.
Right.
And not everyone is able to do that. But we all do. Scripture instructs us to carry one another's burdens.
Correct.
And so even if we can't feel what the other person feels, there is a role that we've been called to play. And then I think all of us would agree that there is a role that we can play.
Yeah.
How do we walk alongside other people who are in that state where they need to dump?
Right.
And you may know that they need to dump, but you don't know what it is. Because often when we get those funisms, the reason is people don't know how to help.
Right.
And so since they don't know how to help, they're like, well, I'm going to tell you what somebody told me. It didn't really make me feel better, but it seemed like the right thing to do because I trust that person at least. And so I'm going to go ahead and say the same thing to you because I don't want to be uncomfortable. Right. And I want to help you. It comes from a good place. I want to help you, and I don't want to be uncomfortable. So I'm going to get out of this as quickly as possible. But I think if people really knew how to help, they would do better. So when you're dealing with someone who's emotionally constipated, that you're walking alongside, maybe a child, maybe a friend, maybe even a parent. What are some things that you can do to walk alongside them?
You know, bro, the first word that comes to mind for me is relationship.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because you cannot properly support someone if there's not a proper foundation. And relationship is the foundation of everything that we do. Right? So if I am talking to someone, whether they're friend, family, or foe, because even the people who don't like you will come to you when they need you. Yeah,
it's
right?
true.
They recognize your skill. They recognize your gift. The one thing that I tell people is if I can foster authentic relationship among people, that means I have to have a relationship before we become to a point of crisis.
Yes.
Right?
So you need proximity.
So I need proximity. I need to figure out how can I get close to the people? How can I get you to lean in on me? So for me, that comes about through natural things. Like I'll see someone posted something. We ain't got to be friends for me to cheer you on. We don't have to be friends for me to be like, hey, yo, come do deck time with me.
You and I built rapport just through Facebook, just through a Facebook post before today.
There it is. And so I think before we can journey with people, we have to first be authentic with self so that we can be authentic with others. When people are in a place that they're hurting, I want to be able to support you with just an ear. Yeah. I want to be able to support you non-judgmentally. I want to be able to sit and be in the presence of your pain without feeling like I have to fix your pain. Yes. I want to be able to just sit with you and allow you to be in that moment with those feelings and be okay with you being in those feelings. Yeah. I think oftentimes where we get into trouble and we start saying those euphemisms is we get to a place where we feel like I want to make you feel better and I have to say something. Yeah. It is absolutely okay to be like, yo, bro, I know you're going through and I really don't have anything supportive to say, but I'm here. I'm here.
I'm here.
Right?
I wrote a song called Mercy Be. And the song is there's 3 parts to it. The first part is literally just me saying, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that. And the second verse is thank you. And then the last verse, I talk about how God has brought me to a place where it's finally time to move on. Yeah. And what's behind that song, I was really blessed to have my brother. He does really shaky cam work, but that's my guy. And to shoot the video, and the song was actually about him. I struggled with clinical depression most of my life till I was about 25 years old, and I would go through these episodes. Episodes, and it's like me and my guy, we play video games together all the time. Sometimes we play for hours, and sometimes we talk, sometimes we didn't. Right. And I remember one specific time that kind of characterizes our relationship. We were riding the bus. We had graduated from Topeka West. We were going out to Washburn, and we're riding the bus together, public bus together, and we're in the bus, and I'm bawling. I'm just crying. And he was like, bro, he was like, is something wrong, or is it just the depression? And I was like, I think it's just the depression, man. He's like, so there's nothing I can do in this moment, right? I was like, that's correct. Because I had explained, like, man, it has nothing to do with my emotions or what's happening. It has nothing to do with it does with my emotions, but not with my circumstances. Right. And I was like, bro, sometimes I just feel this way. And so he was like, there's nothing I can do? I was like, I don't think so, man. He was like, okay. And he just sat next to me. Yeah. And we just rolled, and then we got off the bus, and he was like, you ready? Good. I was like, yup. And we kept walking. We walked to class, and it's like our relationship was like that. Like he was just a stoic, stand still person, but he was always there. And he never felt like he needed to fix it. And he didn't know. But I'm like, man, that had such an impact on me. And I think it's important. Sometimes we get into relationships and we care more about practices than people. And so when the practices of this person are no longer living up to what our relationship is based on, we feel like, hey, we got to correct this. Like, hey, when I'm around you, you're happy, or you make me happy. Like, our practices are off. Or even we feel like, I owe this practice to this person. So when I get around them, I can't share my grief. I can't share my pain, because that person looks at me as an encourager. That person looks at me as someone who uplifts. That person looks at me as someone who's cool, or someone who's stoic, or someone who's stand up, or someone who's strong. And so we don't actually interact as people, we interact as practices. Right. And so we end up treating each other based upon the things that we do rather than who we are. And so I can't really deal with you and who you are in self, because I'm looking out for these practices. Right. I'm looking out for these practices.
How do you serve me?
How do you serve me, or how do I serve you?
Right. When in reality, relationship is supposed to be a partnership, right? Relationship allows you to interact with each other without boundaries. And so oftentimes we are standing in places with people where we have boundaries that don't allow us to get close enough to be intimate in a mental way, right? We allow ourselves to, we'll vent when we're angry, and we'll share a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I want you to be comfortable enough with the person to be able to be raw, like utterly raw. You know, as I've watched, and I would assume my daughter is okay with me sharing, but as I've watched my daughter go through the loss of her son, one of the things that has really been apparent for me is that we don't know how to entertain people with raw emotions because we want them to conform. We're so used to it looking this way, or it should look that way, that raw emotions are hard for people to handle. And even being who I am in my training, the separation of, I'm not a therapist when I'm interacting with my family. I can give advice and I can send you to right people, but I don't want to stand in that role. Right. The reality is that I want you to be so okay with the person you're sharing your moments with that you can be raw and unadulterated. Like, you don't have to use a filter. You don't have to watch what you say. They're not standing in the room with their feelings on their shoulder because they recognize that you are outside of your norm right now. It is okay to grieve the way you grieve, right? Like, there is no prescription pad that says you got to cry now, you got to sleep now, you got to eat now, you got to exercise here, you got to be mommy, you got to be daddy, you got to be sissy, you got to be daughter. Like, there's no roles in grief. In grief, you are without roles, and you are full of emotion, and you are acting and moving according to those emotions. So what people see is really about what your heart has experienced. It is your heart on the outside of your body, and people don't know how to take care of it.
Oh, man. Oh,
You know?
yeah.
So if my heart was sitting outside my chest, you would have care and compassion. You would touch it tenderly. You would caress it. You would be nurtured. You would be careful not to bump it.
Because it's fragile.
Because it's fragile, right? But oftentimes what we do is we let people walk around with their heart on the outside of them, and we bump into them and act like they did something. Right? You know that person that you meet in the grocery store aisle that won't just say, excuse me. Instead, they stand there huffing and puffing. You treat them like that person. In reality, you should be standing there parting the way for them to make through this situation, because they're going through something that they've never experienced. And if they experience death again, it won't look like this death.
It won't look like this. This is unique.
Correct. So I also encourage people to remember that when you lose someone in a physical way, when you lose a job, when your children move out, here's the reality. You are no longer the person you were before that moment happened in your life. Nor will you ever be, because that event changed who you are. Phelicia, before Marcus died, my brother's name is DeMarcus. My brother went to sleep 3 days after my birthday. He went to sleep on October 18th and didn't wake up October 19th. He had a massive heart attack in his sleep. The Phelicia before Marcus died was an avid writer, a published poet, nationally and internationally published poet. She would, write. I mean, like, literally, I have books upon books of things I wrote. Like, I sit in church. I have, like, years of the pastor's sermons in books because I wrote everything. Everything. She doesn't exist anymore. So when a poem comes out of me, it is so rare and far in between. The Phelicia that I was, like, I can't remember her. I remember very little about her. But the experience of losing my brother then created this being who understands grief in a way that other people may not experience it. I'm a Phelicia who is compassionate. I'm a Phelicia who cares about. If people ask you about Phelicia Claiborne, they like, oh man, that girl, like, she was a mess, right? Like, you just didn't cross that. Now I'm someone that people want to be around. I'm someone who encourages people, motivates people. I'm someone who wants to love others beyond the circumstance or situation they're standing in. Because on the other side of it is their greatness.
Even through your grief, you got a new gift.
You get a new gift. You just don't know how to use it yet.
Man, and so it's almost like you're in a new body. It's like you're operating in a new body, and
listen,
you don't know how to traverse or how to move through that.
That mental change is awing. It is life-changing. And I think that we fail to understand that death of a person changes you mentally. It changes how you think about things. When we lost my grandson, I went from being, hey, yo, y'all know I'm going to bed at 9:30. I haven't slept at 9:30 since my grandson died. I could go to sleep without my kids being home or my wife being present, like on her way home. She works late nights or whatever. But when I experienced the loss of my grandson, I needed my kids to be home before I could sleep. I needed to know, when you gonna get here? And I literally would not go to sleep until they were in the door, and would force myself to stay up until I knew my wife was on her way home. And then I would be, you know how you sleep, but you're not asleep?
Yeah,
that's where I was, right? Yeah. Like, I needed to know their physical presence was in the home. The idea is that there's a shift that happens in the human body because the mental has been impacted. So now we're processing how things change and how things impact us, and who are we and what's going to happen next. And all of this anxiousness is kind of like you're waiting for the next shoe to drop, right?
Yeah.
And while you're in that place, there's nothing that someone can say that's going to make you feel good or feel better. It's nothing that anyone is doing. So the other thing we do really good is say, I'm here if you need me, call me, let me know what you need.
They won't.
What is the grieving person going to tell you they need? They don't even know what they need. They don't know. So here's what you do. Here's what you do for your people. If you don't have the words, show up with a meal.
Write this down. These notes.
If you don't have the words, buy a gift card. If you don't have the words, send a flower that simply says, thinking of you. If you don't have the words, sit and be present.
And practicing presence.
Presence is everything. I would much rather see your face than read your text. And we are a population of people who operate from social media. There are so many people who know me who have never even met me, right? Yeah. When people, I finally made a post and said, in this moment, I am not the grief counselor. I am mom, grandma, auntie, sister. I am her. Yeah. Right? And what it created was this flood of people saying, I'm sorry. Your sorries are accepted, but how are you going to be there for me? Yeah. So I then had a smaller group of people who reached out and were like, hey, can I come by? I could do. And you know what we did? We sat on my deck, silent most of the time, and just looked at nature, enjoyed the peace. And so as restorative as the peace was for them just being in my environment, it was more restorative for me to be able to sit and have the presence of someone who would entertain me without words. Yeah.
And I think to play devil's advocate, and there's some other stuff I want to get to, but I think this is so important. Often people don't open up because we don't know how to be loved and known at the same time. Yes. And it's like often we feel like if people truly knew me, they wouldn't love me. And if people really love me, it's because they don't really know me. And that is where like the gospel always enters in for me, because I think about when I experience my regrets. And all of us have regrets at times. If someone says they don't have regrets, I just don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Right. Like you lying to me or to yourself. When we experience our regrets, though, in the moment where we feel like we are our regrets, in the moment where our regrets are almost all we can see, those are the moments that when I think of the fact that Christ knew that about me even when I didn't feel that, that Christ knew that about me before I committed the action that left me scarred with regret, and that Christ knows the me that's coming after and knows that there will be new regrets. Right. He sees that, yet he loves me. And that changes the way that I interact with him. And I think a lot of us are scared for people to see us in that space. And so we're also scared to see other people in that space. But there's a certain type of relationship. When you talk about your friends like, hey, I'm going to come over and I'm going to get it with you, that builds a certain type of relationship when they see you in that place and they stay.
But the other thing is, bro, believe it or not, the people that showed up at my door who wanted to sit with me were not people that fell in the category. I'm very picky in how I use the word friend. And so there are associates for me, and then there are friends for me. And I probably have very few friends, right? So the people who showed up for me were definitely people I put in the category of associates, meaning that I associate with them. I don't know them well enough to bring them intimately close with me, but they sat with me in an intimate moment without having a friendship relationship the way I define it. Now, I am not saying that they don't call me friend, because they do, but I see friendships very intimately, and I'm very protective about who I allow in that space. But it's interesting. And so I share with my best friend. My best friend drove the 1,100 miles to come be with me like a week after. Right. And what I found is that the people who you expect to be there are not always the people who will show up. But what you have to do is allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to let them know, I need you to be here. And so when I say that transparency and relationship are important, I have to be able to open my mouth and say, all I need right now is the presence of my friends. And so I have a group of friends that I can hit, like we have a code word, we send it to each other, everybody knows to show up, right? But a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have friends. A lot of people have been isolated for 2.5 years. A lot of people don't know what to do with their grief. A lot of people are just now facing their grief. Like my neighbors just buried their loved one who died in the winter, and they buried him this weekend. Wow. Right? So this COVID has disconnected us from what we know to be ritual in grief. And so now we're learning new practices. The reality is that I can celebrate you wherever I am. So for us, we need to learn that grief doesn't always look the way we thought it should look. Our practices aren't going to look the way we think they should, but we have to allow people the space to just be as transparent and as raw and as real as they could possibly be. My message to people about grief is just be. It doesn't have to look any certain way. It doesn't have to sound any certain way. It doesn't have to be catered and put into a box for someone else to be able to accept it. The reality is, if you would just be, everything else around you will adapt. And if it can't adapt, it will move itself out the way.
Move itself. Wow. Man, and with that, y'all, we are going to take a brief break, and we're going to be back with some more from Miss Phelicia Glass here on South by East.
Are you interested in podcasting, audio, or visual media, and just don't know how to get started or take your content to the next level? Then Studio 104 was built just for you. A fully functioning audio-visual podcast studio, industry-level equipment, and an affordable price to help you make that album you always wanted, start that podcast, or even share the story of how your business is impacting the community. Book your session along with a free consultation today at www.fellowshiphighcrest.com/studio104.
Welcome back to the South by East podcast. We are sitting here with Phelicia Glass, and what I really want to start doing now, Miss Phelicia, is heading towards the intersection. And so a lot of people who've been watching this may be feeling like, man, what y'all are saying is resonating, and now I have no idea where to go and what to do. And so one thing that, we had kind of spoken about a little bit is that there are certain communities where there's been a stigma around getting help. At least some of those euphemisms we talk about, all those different things. When, for one, there's kind of a three-part question. For one, how do you know that you might need some help? And then what type of person or resource should you be looking for? Because not every therapist is for every person.
That part.
I know that part. Not everybody know that part, right? And so it's like letting you know right now, it's not that you did something wrong, but that may not be the person for you.
Right.
So what should you be looking for? And then if you don't feel like you have access, what do? What resources are available to help you or someone that you care about get into those things? And so they'll kind of rephrase so that first part, man, how do you know, first of all, how do you know that, man, I might need to go see somebody? I might need some help.
So oftentimes I tell people, if you get to a place in life with whatever you're struggling with that is interfering in your ability to function, meaning you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're distracted at work, you are having tensions in your relationships and can't figure out why, you're irritable.
I want to break that down a little bit, because sometimes people are what we call functioning addicts.
Absolutely.
And functioning doesn't really mean functioning.
It does not mean functioning.
So let's not think in the clinical sense. If you are having issues in your relationships, it's not okay to just say, well, that's just how I am.
That part, yes. So
that's just how I am. There might be something wrong.
There might be something wrong. So ideally, I tell people, one, I think when you talk about resources and where do we get started, the reality is that if people around you are coming to you saying, hey, are you okay? Is there some way I can help? That's clue number one. Clue number two, if you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're not recognizing who you are, clue number two. And lastly, I think it's about being able to be honest with yourself about the emotional checklist, right? So we talk about mental health being, physical, psychosocial, and emotional. It's the whole self. And if your whole self is not well, then we need to check in. And so I often tell people, start with the person you see most often, which is your primary care doctor. They already know you best. I think a lot of people fail to understand that you don't have to go to a therapist first. I think it's absolutely okay to go to your primary care doctor. Most primary cares, when you go in, they're going to do a mental health check, like a mini check anyway, to kind of see how you're feeling. Are you eating well? Are you depressed? Are you sleeping more often? Are you feeling unmotivated? Are you not engaged in activities? But you can go to your primary care doctor, just schedule an appointment, call the nurses line and be like, hey, this is Phelicia. I'm not feeling like myself. I think the doctor needs to see me. And tell them, I don't know whether this is mental or physical. Can we check in on this? Oftentimes you can get that checkup and they'll give you a referral to a therapist that they work with or someone that they think might be a good fit with you. Otherwise, what I tell people is absolutely okay to get online. And so here's what I say about getting online. I use several sites. One of them is called Therapy for Black Girls. If you're not black, you can still use the site for brown girls.
Therapy for black girls.
Therapy for Black Girls. There's another site called Therapy for Black Men. And I also use Psychology Today. Psychology Today and the other two websites, there are sites that you can get onto. You can click a therapist, look for someone in your state or your zip code even, if you want to be that specific. If you want to use someone that's in this community that works over here, put in the zip codes over here, and it'll find you who's closest to you. I also encourage people to call the therapist that you want to see. I want you to ask them for their 15-minute free consultation or 20-minute free consultation so that you can say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Tell me your experience with this. Listen to the sound of their voice, because there's nothing like going to a therapist whose voice you can't stand to hear, right? Because everybody's voice isn't for you. Be able to look at, if you're struggling with anxiety, do they specialize in anxiety? If you're struggling with depression, is depression something that they specialize in? I believe in seeing clinicians who are trained to treat what you're dealing with. And so it is, I get it. I know that there are lots of therapists in our community, and there are lots of us who are general practitioners, meaning we could see you for a lot of everything. But if you're having a serious issue in your life, I want you to see someone who will take your issue serious, meaning I don't want you to be sitting across from a therapist who's learning how to treat your issue while they're treating you.
Man, come on.
I want you to go to someone who is going to have the answers, have the training, get what you need right when you need it.
Is it okay? Is it okay to ask a therapist for a referral?
Absolutely. And a good therapist will give you one, right? So I have people who call my office all the time who are looking for someone who specializes in anxiety. I don't specialize in anxiety. I can treat, if you have mild anxiety symptoms, I can treat that. But if you're having your life disrupted 3 to 4 times a week with anxiety, I'm not the one for you. Right. So I will send them to someone who specializes in anxiety or specializes in whatever else they need. Even if it's a client that I'm working with that develops a new symptom that I'm unable to treat, I will refer. And so it's important to refer. And ask for what you need. Be okay with it. Here's the idea. What you need, you deserve. So ask for what you need and then go get what you need. Do not accept just mediocre care from someone who's a generalist. It's kind of like, I would not go to my general practitioner if I was diagnosed with cancer. Right. I'm going to go to an oncologist who specializes in my form of cancer. Right? Well, when it comes to mental health is an illness. It's a disease of the brain. I need someone who specializes in that type of disease that I'm suffering with. It is okay to get what you need. When it comes to, I think your last question was about access, right? What if I don't have access? What if I don't have insurance? So not having insurance can be a deal breaker for some people. Here's what I tell people. Never be afraid to use your community mental health centers. Never be afraid to ask a therapist if they have a sliding scale, because some of them do. At your local mental health centers, we have Family Service and Guidance Center. We have Vallejo. Vallejo's for adults. Family Service and Guidance Center is for those under 18. I encourage people to use them. They have great services. I know that people will complain, but if you don't have insurance, they are your primary source because they get grant dollars that will help fund your services. I know clients who have went to Vallejo and got services for $5. Go get what you need. So I know that the services may not be exactly what you want. I think they both offer great services, but it's about getting the clinician that you need for what you need. I also believe that it's absolutely okay to talk to your primary care physician. I'm a huge advocate of working with the primary care physician. Tell them what you're struggling with. See if they have some referrals that will accept your, whatever services you need that offer them. talk to them because they have partnerships. They have relationships outside of their office. So use those resources. Stormont Vale is a great resource as well. Stormont Vale Behavioral Health Center. We often don't talk about them in our community, but they have an entire behavioral health team that we should be using, that the community can use. And they do have dollars to help people who may not be insured. That's why they're huge agencies with lots of dollars out there, and we should be using them. So I want you to know that you're not out here alone. There's absolutely no reason why you can't Google or Alexa therapist near me. They'll give you a list, right?
Right.
If you're looking for a black therapist, you can say black therapist, black female therapist near me. It will tell you. I know that oftentimes in our community, meaning Southeast Topeka, we're looking for people who look like us, whether they're Latino, whether they're African American, whether they're Caucasian. Whoever you're looking for, it's out here. We are out here. I think oftentimes we're overlooked because we may not be the majority. But I know for a fact, there are more than 2 handful of African American clinicians. I know that there's probably like somewhere between 25 and 50 of us in Topeka, or nearby, or Lawrence. That we're here, and I want you all to access us. I want you to know that we're here to support. We're here to advocate, and we're here to help you use your voice so that you can get the services that you need. But you can't get anything with a closed mouth. You can't get anything keeping secrets about your mental health. You cannot get anything sharing that information with someone who's just going to pacify you. It's time to get uncomfortable and talk about what's really happening. So let's say you have a friend that needs help. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to partner with them. I want you to be able to say, hey, I recognize that you need help. How can I help you? I want to go with you to your first appointment. I want to sit with you when you're scheduling the appointment. I want to be able to be a resource. Use me to get what you need. If you don't know, I'll go with you while we find out together. It's absolutely okay to be in their business because you love them, right? Because you love them, it's okay to say, I am committed to doing this with you. It's okay. Why? Because we love each other. Why? Because I want to see you be better. Now, I'm just this type of person. If you feel like the people in your life are unavailable and you can't call them, inbox me. Phelicia Glass, inbox me. I will connect you to a therapist. I will get on the phone with you. I will show up at the doctor with you. I have went and attended funerals with people that I don't even know because someone needed someone to support them. I am here for you. And I want you to know that most of us have several people in our life who are just like that. I want you to remember that it's okay to lean in the same way it's okay to not be okay.
Man, thank you so much, Phelicia. And man, there's so many beautiful things that you have shared, so many impactful things that you shared. Man, I hope that y'all are soaking it up. We're going to have the notes there in the description. And just before we get out of here, Phelicia, like the work that you're doing is one of immense weight, both on you and weight and impact for our community. How can we as a community, we've talked a lot about how you can help us and the resources that you can offer to help us. How can we as a community support you and other practitioners in your position?
Oftentimes I tell people with a larger platform, you host events that bring mental health to your community. So get the people out here, hosting a mental health day, host a mental health forum, doing things like this, putting mental health clinicians on your platform and sharing with them, getting them to share what they do, how they do it. The more you do that of putting people in your community's homes, in your community's ear, the more people are going to become more comfortable with us. Invite us to do a 10-minute presentation at your church service. Get us on the platforms. Let's get it. There's work to be done. The same way we save souls, we have to save minds.
Yes.
And, the reality is that all minds matter. I have a t-shirt that says Black Minds Matter. Yeah. But the reality is that we all matter. And you as a human being, as a person, if your mental isn't together, the rest of your life will fall apart because it all starts at the head.
Man, that is beautiful. Man, y'all take that, soak that up. I'm going to go back and watch this over a couple of different times and absorb everything that's been shared here today. We appreciate you guys joining us for episode 3 of the South by East podcast, and we'll see you at the next intersection.
Peace.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for tuning into the South by East podcast, where we meet you at the intersection of culture and community. If you enjoy the content and want to help us keep the wheels turning, please rate and review us on your podcast app. For more information on resources shared, check the show notes, and we'll see you at the next intersection. We out.